David Brewster here, new episode of Scales and Tales, and this is the Jan Hammer scale, and I've technically featured this once before. It's been over 5 years ago. I think that lesson was called the Mixolydian Pentatonic scale, but we're going to revisit this and definitely flesh it out and really, kind of expand this idea and this sound. It's very inspiring. It's technically an extension of the minor pentatonic scale, kind of an alteration, and you can hear this in lots of music aside from Jan Hammer. But it definitely got the nickname the Jan Hammer scale like in the mid to late 70s when he was working with Jeff Beck. And Jan Hammer's an absolute legend of music, way beyond the Miami Vice, soundtrack and Crockett's theme and all that stuff. But definitely a legend of music. And this is a very interesting kind of extension or alteration of the scale. So here we go. So before we dive into the scale, I wanted to give a little bit more background on Jan Hammer, and he's definitely a legendary musician. And it really bothers me when people, kind of sum up a certain musician or artist or a band, and they really just kind of relate it all to one thing, like one album or one movie or whatever. And with Jan, yes, he did Miami Vice. That's really impressive. That was in the 80s, but a full decade before that, he was working with fusion and rock elite, John McLaughlin, Al Di Meola, Tommy Bolin, Jeff Beck, eventually Steve Lukather, Neil Schon, and people like that. But here's an image with a dozen albums that feature Jan Hammer working with great guitarists, and I own actually 8 of these 12 albums. Okay, to get started here, this entire lesson is going to be in the key of G, and it's up to you to kind of flesh this out in other keys and put it in other positions on the guitar neck. But we're going to do a lot of work with this. We're really going to dive even deeper into this really useful and interesting sound. So to get started here, we're going to base this in the key of G, and if we think of the minor pentatonic like G minor pentatonic, just locate the box like right here. Good old G minor pentatonic, right? So that's a 5-note scale. You could also view that as a 5-note arpeggio, right? Because we've got the root, the minor third, the fifth, and the flat 7. So there's G minor 7, and then if we add that C note, now it's a 5-note arpeggio. You could view that as like a G minor 11 if you wanted to. But the important thing there is really noticing the tonality or the sound of that scale. It's minor 7, right? Technically minor 11, but still like related to minor 7, chords. So all we're going to do here is modify that scale, but we have to start with that. So there's G minor pentatonic. And then to convert that into Dominant Pentatonic or Mixolydian Pentatonic or the Jan Hammer scale, all we have to do is change all the B flats to B. So we're just raising the minor third to the major third, and abracadabra, we're there. So instead of this, which is the minor pentatonic, we're doing this. And you can probably tell, like, just that one note alteration really changed the sound of that scale. And keep in mind, we're just raising B flat to B, right? But here's the, Jan Hammer scale or the Mixolydian Pentatonic or the Dominant Pentatonic in the key of G right there. Okay, so we've discussed this before, taking the minor pentatonic and altering or changing it into the dominant pentatonic scale, just like that. But we haven't done this before. It's a 5-note scale, just like the minor pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale. Minor pentatonic has 5 positions. That means the Jan Hammer scale actually has 5 positions. And we're going to flesh this out. So what I want you to do is, once you kind of get a feel for that right there, which is stretchy, take that exact same fingering in that scale and we're going to move it up an octave. So we're going to start this next area, fleshing this out in 5 positions. Start way up here, right? The same thing, but an octave higher. Right? And you can definitely hear that kind of, you know, dominant 7 kind of tonality, how it matches that right there. So there's the exact same scale an octave higher. Right, so that's pretty simple, right? Just taking this shape and relocating it somewhere else. But let's flesh this out in another, you know, position. So there's G, and really all we're going to do here is just basically make a scale off of every note in that, you know, that scale. So we're going to use, you know, that G note, that B note, C, D, you know, that F, and G. So we started on G right there. So the next scale is going to start on this F note, right? And all we're doing is playing minor pentatonic, but we're changing B flat to B, so that therefore changes it to dominant pentatonic. So anywhere you have a B flat in those minor pentatonic shapes, just alter it to B, like this. Right? So there's F to G, there's a B right there. So we change that B flat, normally they're on the 13th fret, to B on the 14th fret. There's C, D, there's F, there's G, there's B again right there on the G string, and then C, D, F, G, like that. Right, same scale, just a different fingering for it. Now let's continue this process. Let's move down, and now we're going to basically, you know, create it right here. So there's your D, F, G, and then you're going to stretch up and grab that B there on the 14th fret on the A, right? And then C, D, F, G. Right here, this is kind of weird, that B to C. So I'm using my third finger to the pinky, and then that D to F. Right. So there's another position of it right there. So we're just slowly kind of making our way down the fretboard. Now we're going to start it on C right here, right? So there's your C, D, F, G. There's B to C right there. Right there's that D to F, and then G to B, and then that C to D. So there's the fingering right there. And now we go down another note. There's a B right here, right? So this one's definitely interesting, because now we've got B to C, we've got this D to F, G to B, and then there's C to D, there's F, G, and B to C. So that one's definitely kind of weird as far as the way it feels. You've got this kind of close together, spread apart, and then spread apart even further. And then just kind of moving through that. Go all the way back here to that G note right there. We're back where we started. And that's really interesting, because we're just taking minor pentatonic scales, you know, like this, and altering them into the Jan Hammer scale, right? And you can basically do this with every, you know, pentatonic position. Now that you've seen the change from minor pentatonic to dominant pentatonic, or the Jan Hammer scale, and then fleshing it out in all 5 positions along the fretboard, there's a lot of other things you can do with this. So I'm going to share one more idea here. Now what we're going to do is move kind of diagonally across the fretboard. Instead of just locking in a position, you know, on the neck, we're going to move around. And I'm going to basically show you one way to go up, and then a different way of going back down. And we're going to start way down here for this. So now F to G, and then there's your B, C, D, right? And we're just going to basically maintain that same fingering pattern and just move it up an octave. So there's F, G, B, C, D, and then do it again up an octave right there, and then do it again right there, like that. Now right there you're on D, you can do a position shift and grab this F to G, like that. And then right there I want you to come down like this, grab that G, F, and then D, C, B, and then go down an octave and do it again. Like that. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Scales and Tales with this look at the Jan Hammer scale. Definitely a very interesting tonality and sound and flavor that you'll find in lots of music. And there's lots of players out there that have kind of dipped into this. I definitely catch people like Eric Johnson and John Petrucci and Guthrie Govan and Joe Satriani, Steve Vai. There's tons of players. But it is associated directly with Jan Hammer and Jeff Beck, from the work they did back in the mid to late 70s together. And it's just really interesting to notice something that you already probably know, the minor pentatonic scale, changing one note, which radically changes the tonality and sound and flavor of what you're doing. And it really gives you something strong you can play over dominant seventh chords, flat 7, like G7. And then also kind of like weaving between minor pentatonic and dominant pentatonic, you're kind of flirting with that minor and major third that you hear a lot in blues. But you're doing it with a scale, instead of just kind of doing it with one note, you're literally twisting pentatonic into that dominant Mixolydian kind of territory. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Layout Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.